Hi, I'm doing this video kind of late at night. Originally I wanted to try and do an animated battle map, or at least borrow some animated maps from the American Battlefield Trust and make a video on this to give a better explanation, but I'm just going to explain it here. I've had a busy day and I haven't really had time to mess with it, but today is July 21st. 2022. Yeah, I am making this video because something very, very significant happened on this day in history. So I'm gonna give a quick explanation. This is one of the battles I know more than some of the smaller engagements I've been talking about recently, because this is the first large-scale battle of the American Civil War. So, anyone that knows the history of the Civil War knows that the Battle of Bull Run, or First Bull Run, or the Battle of First Manassas would be fought on July 21st, 1861 at Manassas Junction in Virginia, between the newly formed Confederate States of America under the command of General P.G.T. Beauregard and Union forces marching from Washington, D.C. under the command of General Irvin McDowell. So, as you know, the Battle of First Bull Run, or First Manassas as the rebels called it, was the first large-scale battle of the Civil War, as I just mentioned. So, the Civil War is new. It started in April of the same year. So, April, May, June, July, that's 3 months that the Civil War has been going on. You know, there's been skirmishes here and there, and of course, the more well-known firing on Fort Sumter that started the war to begin with on April 12th. You know, there's been skirmishes at Fairfax County Courthouse and places like that, mostly in Virginia, and President Abraham Lincoln has raised 70,000 troops to suppress the rebellion. It's a 90-day enlistment, you know. Hopes are up for the soldiers. On both sides. Both sides are cocky, they're arrogant, ignorant to what war is about. And, you know, they all kind of believe the war will be over in 90 days, with their side claiming the victory. So, Bull Run this is where Bull Run plays a very important part. Because the Battle of Bull Run opened a lot of eyes on both sides. It's when both sides realized that this was going to be a long war and a lot of people were going to die on both sides. And it wasn't going to be as simple as marching into Richmond or marching into Washington, D.C. It just wasn't going to be that simple. So, we know Bull Run. Both armies are relatively inexperienced. The Confederate Army in particular, because the Confederate Army is not an official military in terms of, you know, they're in rebellion. And so, the Battle of Bull Run begins on the morning of July 21st, 1861. And, of course, you know, you have those famous figures from Civil War history, Thomas J. Jackson and Jubal Early and Jeb Stuart. You have all those present at the battle. All of which are Confederate, that I'm focused on right now, because these help turn the tide of, these people helped turn the tide of the battle in favor of the Confederacy. Particularly Stonewall Jackson, as he will later be known, is who I want to focus on. Because Stonewall Jackson is a veteran of the Mexican-American War, as many of the officers on both sides are. So, a lot of the information I have comes from the American Battlefield Trust, who I give credit for the research. And that I have been able to go to their website. They have a website. They have a Civil War Trust app. You can go to any one of those, and they provide good information, videos, and maps, and diagrams, and some pretty cool merchandise, too. So, Bull Run is fought again in Fairfax County and Prince William County, Virginia. The first full-scale battle of the Civil War. So, the key word here that I want you to pay attention to is that the fierce fight forced both the North and the South to face a sobering reality that the war would be long and bloody. Both sides thought it would end in 90 days or less, because both sides were cocky, inexperienced. But it wasn't that simple. So, as we know, the Civil War had officially begun when the Confederacy fired on Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861. And, of course, Major Anderson, who commanded the fort, surrendered to General Beauregard at that point in time. So at this moment in time, both sides, North and South, are raising an army. They're raising their armies, you know, and at that point in time, the United States didn't have a large military of millions of soldiers, you know. So the Civil War kind of was different in that perspective, you know. The Civil War, you know, 70,000 volunteers for the Union Army. That was pretty huge. That was a pretty huge deal for the time, because our military wasn't, during the Mexican-American War, our military wasn't anywhere near that large. So another perspective I want you to think about, Bull Run is just 25 miles from Washington, D.C. And the Confederacy is poised and absolutely quick to try and march their troops into D.C. and force peace negotiations within the U.S. Congress. And Lincoln's under a lot of pressure to quell the rebellion as soon as possible. So, as the American Battlefield Trust puts it, President Lincoln is pressed by the public to get this war over with within 90 days, something that he knows is probably not going to happen. And President Lincoln is pushing General McDowell, who's cautious about moving in. He's pushing him to embark on a campaign to capture the Confederate capital in Richmond, Virginia. And McDowell is cautious, like a lot of the Union generals that you would see in the Civil War. McClellan and Meade alike were cautious generals, and Lincoln had a hard time getting them to move. So, McDowell's troops are stopped at Bull Run by Brigadier General P.G.T. Beauregard's rebel forces. So, the rebel forces stopped them at Bull Run in Virginia. So, on July 16th, just days before the battle, the Union 90-day volunteer army under McDowell it was around 35,000 troops at the time. They have great enthusiasm but little training. They set out for Washington, D.C., while the Confederates under Beauregard, equally green, are positioned behind Bull Run Creek, west of Centerville. Their aim is to block the Union Army advance on the Confederate capital by defending the railroad junction at Manassas. So, this is a Civil War. This is before cars and planes and all that stuff. Railroads play a significant role in the Civil War in transporting supplies and troops. You knock out the railroads, you knock out one army or the other's link to supplies and reinforcements. The same with rivers, which will be explained at a later date to greater detail. So the railroads connect the strategically important Shenandoah Valley with the Virginia interior. So these railroads connect to vital areas of interest for the Confederacy, and the Union Army's aim is to knock out these railroads or put them under their control, one or the other. Because they know that without the railroads, the Confederacy will be blocked from having supplies. So there's another Confederate army under General Joseph E. Johnston operating in the valley, and is poised to reinforce Beauregard. And General McDowell's plan is to make quick work of Beauregard's forces before Johnston can join him. The next day, on the 17th, both sides, there are some skirmishes along Bull Run and Blackburn's Ford near the center of Beauregard's line. Skirmishes, small combat, nothing serious, no major action is fought. And the inconclusive fight causes McDowell to revise his attack plan, requiring 3 more days to implement. So these are all kind of setbacks for McDowell, and in the meantime, Johnston's men in the valley managed to elude the Federals and board trains and head for Bull Run. They arrive at the scene on July 20th, just a day before the fighting takes place. So, we have the battle. I have a diagram from the American Battlefield Trust. Excellent source of information for the Civil War, the War of 1812, and the Revolutionary War. So if you want to learn more about any of those 3 wars, I don't know as far as World War II and I go, or anything like that, but as for the 3 wars I previously mentioned, the American Battlefield Trust is your best source of information. So, I have a diagram here. We have 60,680 forces engaged, 28,450 are Union, and 32,230 are Confederate. July 21st, 1861, McDowell advances early in the morning up Bull Run Creek to cross behind Beauregard's left, but he is hampered by an amphibious plan that requires complex synchronization. Something that does not happen. The army is not synchronized. They're not trained. Constant delays in the march by the green officers. Keep in mind the officers are just as green as the enlisted men. And the officers, constant delays in the march by the green officers and their troops, as well as effective scouting by the Confederates, give McDowell's movements away. So the Confederates know his movements, so Beauregard can act accordingly. Later in the morning, McDowell's artillery opens up on the Confederates across Bull Run near a stone bridge, and two divisions finally cross at Sudley Ford and make their way south behind the Confederate left flank. Beauregard sends 3 brigades to handle what he thinks is only a distraction while planning his own flanking movement of the Union left. So, the battle has pretty much begun in earnest. What will soon, unknown to them, but known to us in the present, the first major battle of the Civil War has just begun. And it will be a bloody fight. The Federals at first have the upper hand throughout the morning as they drive the Confederate forces back from Matthews Hill. The Confederates retreat and they rally up on an open hilltop near the home of the widow Judith Henry. She kind of lives in the area. She has a home in the area. And a lot of the fighting will take place around her home as Confederates take defensive positions around the perimeter of the home. So I want to focus on Brigadier General Thomas Jonathan Jackson for a minute. Where a brigade of Virginia regiments led by him assembles around Henry House Hill. Jackson will gain fame in the Civil War as a prominent Confederate general who served General Lee very well at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. But here, I want to focus on what makes him famous, what gives him his famous name. Jackson forms the scattered Confederate artillery into a formidable line on the eastern slope of the hill with his infantry hidden in the tall grass behind the guns. So Jackson is one of my favorite commanders on either side during the Civil War because he arrives on the scene, he's assessing the situation, and he's placing his guns and his troops accordingly where he thinks they can do the most damage to the enemy. And it proves to be quite effective. So as the Confederates reinforce their lines, McDowell pauses his attack, consolidating his own forces, and moves more divisions across Bull Run and occupies Chin Ridge west of Henry Hill. It is at this moment that McDowell messes up bad and places 2 rifled artillery batteries on the western side of Henry House Hill within 300 yards of Jackson's guns. So this means, in simple terms, that McDowell's troops are within range. His artillery batteries, his rifled artillery batteries, are within range of Jackson's guns. And Jackson is in a perfect position. And also soon, Union infantry regiments become targets of Jackson's nearby artillery, and a contest between infantry and artillery erupts, causing havoc and accidentally killing Judith Henry in the crossfire as she hides in her home. So Judith Henry is a civilian casualty of the battle. She's killed by the crossfire of a deathly struggle. Jackson's men are holding firm. They're holding their ground. They're fighting the best they can. And sometime during the fight, Confederate Brigadier General Bernard B. encourages his own brigade to rally with Jackson. And he famously here declares that Jackson is standing like a stone wall in the face of the enemy in the face of musketry and artillery. General B is killed in action, but his statement will forever live on. And from that moment, Jackson is known as Stonewall. That's where Jackson got the name, Stonewall Jackson. And that name sticks with him throughout the whole Civil War until he was finally killed at Chancellorsville in 1863. And the name also goes to his brigade, the Stonewall Brigade, the 1st Brigade. I also want to make a quick note here that Jackson is injured during the fight. Not bad, but he is injured when a stray musket ball hits him in the hand. But he does live. So later in the afternoon, Confederate reinforcements under Colonel Jubal Early extend the Confederate line and attack the Union right flank on Chin Ridge, and as Jackson's men advance across the top of Henry Hill and push back the Federal infantry, capturing some of the guns as well. So basically from this moment on, everything turns into a scatter. The Union Army is scattering in retreat. It's confusion. It's a mess. And the Confederates at this point are overwhelming the Federal forces. And this withdrawal quickly spreads to the flanks. And the Virginia cavalry under Colonel Jeb Stuart arrive on the field and charge into the confused mass of Union regiments as the Federals retreat from the field. So, by the end of the fighting at Bull Run, everything is confusion. I also want to make a quick note that civilians traveled from Washington, D.C. Civilians, not soldiers, came to watch the fighting as there was some sort of play or theater or something like that. They came to watch as the battle took place, and there was confusion amongst them as well as they retreated back towards Washington, D.C. as the Confederates kept laying into the Union forces. So, everything's confusion. The Union Army is forced into retreat. And the estimated casualties in this diagram are as follows. There are 4,878 casualties. This is killed, wounded, and missing. 2,896 of these casualties are Union, and 1,982 are Confederate. So, this is the bloodiest battle of the Civil War up at this point in time, but it's gonna get a lot worse than this, and you see the results of Shiloh and Gettysburg and Chancellorsville and Chickamauga. The price of the Civil War was severe. It was unlike anything America has seen in her short history. So the battle ends. The Confederates are bolstered by the arrival from Richmond of President Jefferson Davis of the Confederacy. And they're bolstered to just march right on into Washington, D.C. and end it right there. But the victorious forces are too disorganized to pursue the Federals. And McDowell's fleeing forces are already hampered by narrow bridges and overturned wagons, and are further impeded by hordes of fleeing civilian spectators. By July 22nd, the day after the battle, remnants of the shattered Union Army reached the safety of Washington, D.C. And later, McDowell is relieved of his command. And this would be something that Lincoln has to do often with many commanders. With McClellan after Antietam Creek, and relieved Burnside after Fredericksburg. The list kind of goes on. So I wanted to talk about that for a moment. I wanted to do more of a documentary about it, maybe add some animated maps, but I haven't had time to really get into that, but I want to do that in some later videos and explain some battles in greater detail. But Bull Run is one of the battles I know a lot better. I want to visit the battlefield. Maybe one day I'll get a chance to. If you're interested, you can check it out too. Some national battlefield. There were 2 battles fought there during the Civil War. The other one, I believe, was in August of 1862, which was also a Confederate victory. But anyway, that is it. I've pretty much covered the basis of the Battle of First Manassas, the Battle of First Bull Run, and again, I got a lot of my information now comes from the American Battlefield Trust, because I simply do not trust any other source better than them. They provide good information. Of course, a lot of the information is to my own knowledge, my own memory. I've read books on it, and I've done my own research. But it all narrows down to the American Battlefield Trust that helps make this easier on me. So, if you want to check them out, go right ahead. But anyway, that was the history of the Battle of First Manassas, or Bull Run, as people from the North would call it. But anyway, I'll try and tune in with another video some other time. Until then, see ya.